Hi, welcome to Revenue Marketing Television, the CMO Insight Series. I'm your host, Jeff Pedowitz, President and CEO of the Pedowitz Group. Today, as our guest, we have Mark Floisand, who's Chief Marketing Officer at Coveo. Mark, welcome to the show.
Hey, Jeff, thanks for having me.
Pleasure to have you. We were talking just shortly before the interview about how important it is to be personal in marketing. Isn't that kind of counterintuitive in a lot of ways? I mean, shouldn't we, as companies trying to develop an emotional connection with our buyers and our customers?
Yeah, it's a good point. I guess what I would observe is there's been this fundamental sea shift in terms of the task in front of marketers. I'm old enough with enough gray hair to know that there was a time when you could kind of, pick a target segment and create what was largely a homogeneous message to that segment, go after them and, apply math to it, and a certain number of them would ultimately become prospects and convert into customers. And you know, along came the ability to find everything that one needs to know as a consumer digitally, on your phone, online, wherever it is, and more importantly, see that other people were contributing to that information as well in terms of reviews and the like. And so this balance of power shifted to consumers away from marketeers. And so with that sort of sea change, the role of the marketeer, to my mind, has fundamentally altered. We have to be more focused on equipping those individual consumers, those individual shoppers and buyers to discover the information they need themselves. And that's a sea change.
And how do we do that and make it authentic?
Yeah, it's a good point. You know, Authenticity is central to this. I think one of the things we're seeing is as the ability to both find good information about an organization and bad for that matter is at the hands of everyone now. If you're not authentic, you get called out fast. If you're not transparent, you get called out fast. If you do something wrong and try and cover it over, you get called out fast. And so in this social ecosystem that we now live within, authenticity is actually fundamental. At Coveo, one of our values is integrity. And that sounds trite, but if you think about making sure that everything you do has a level of integrity that you could look your mother in the eye and tell you about, that authenticity starts to breathe through in the brand, and it reflects itself in things like, what do you do and what don't you do? What data do you choose not to buy or choose not to find in the back of a cab because it wouldn't be an authentic thing to do in terms of bringing that into your marketing information. How do you make sure that you are not treading over the line that consumers have grown increasingly fearful of, in the notion of respect my privacy, respect my permissions, don't surprise me with stuff that I find creepy or scary. By all means, delight me and anticipate what I need, but don't surprise me. And so I think those kind of health warnings, that sort of sensitivity to how we as consumers want to be treated, can really be a guiding light for marketeers as well. Put yourself in your own shoes. If what you're doing you would be uncomfortable receiving, that's normally a pretty good acid test.
Good point. I think, though, a lot of us, we look at Amazon or we look at Netflix and we say, well, that's such a great example of being customer centric. They seem to know my preferences. But those systems from day one were built around the customer. They didn't try and take their systems and then retrofit them later. And I think whether you're in B2B or B2C, a lot of this gets built in pieces, right? And then we build our processes to our strategy, or we're doing things internally, and then we try and fit it to the customer. So from an operational standpoint, how do you get to that authenticity at scale? How do you actually then operationalize the customer experience when really for most of us, we haven't built our companies like Amazon, even though we would love to be in some way respect, or at least have that market share for sure. But I mean, how do you go about doing that?
Yeah, it's a great observation, Jeff. And I think we'd all hold out companies like Amazon and Netflix as really, really good examples of what a personal experience feels like. I go to my Netflix queue and the recommendations that are made to me are specific to my tastes, either because of things I've expressly viewed and they have that history, or their own machine learning pattern matching has identified things that they can suggest to me that I'm probably going to like. And so that degree of authenticity that is unique and specific to me and my account really, really is I wouldn't say a high bar. It's a difficult thing to attain, but it's the expectation of us as consumers now. That's the norm in terms of consumer expectation. So you're absolutely right. There's this big gap between what we as consumers have come to know and love over the last, decade of increasingly personalized, more relevant engagements, and the lag of most brands aren't there yet because, as you point out, they have been building things in silos for good reasons. From a marketing point of view, I'm as guilty as any of I look back in my career and can point to, we bought a tool to do X, or an application to do Y, or something else to do Z or Z, depending where in the world you are. And each of those systems was invested in or subscribed to for the best will in the world and did something specific. But what they also tend to do is gather up interaction data specific to that. So maybe it's an email system, maybe it's a social media measurement system, maybe it's a web content management system. Under the hood, they're all gathering up interaction data, but it's siloed. And so ironically, as marketeers, as we've striven to buy the next hot widgety thing to do some new way of interacting with customers in a quest to delight them, we're actually making the problem worse by creating yet another application silo with yet another little pocket of disconnected data, and we're losing sight of our customers. And so what's the remedy? You go back, you can YouTube this stuff and find that Jeff Bezos did an interview with 60 Minutes like a decade ago, 2 decades ago, where he basically said, we're investing in gathering this information because it's going to help us be more helpful to our customers. 20 years back. Well, here we are, fast forward today, and they're one of the most valuable assets on the planet. And how do other brands do this? I guess I'd advocate fundamentally 2 things. One is recognize that across all of those different systems and repositories, there's information and content that could be put to better use in the service of customers. There's product information files in a web content management system. There are PDF documents on a Google Drive someplace. There's service history records in a customer database. There's product information in a shopping catalog. All of these things exist in just about every brand, but they're not unified. And so as a starting point, thinking about technology that can connect to those different things and unify that content into something that can apply relevance, that can start to compare documents, whether they're structured or unstructured, doesn't matter. But really unify that content into something that can become an asset. And then the second piece of this, of course, is going back to that interaction data, how to also stitch that stuff together, how to join the dots and ultimately create a view of all the customer journeys, all the employee journeys for that matter, and all the prospect journeys that have existed across that organization. Those 2 sets of data can be fed into machine learning tools that really bring the computer horsepower, as you rightly point out, to do this stuff at scale. No one's doing these things by hand anymore. Amazon with 1 billion customers is not handcrafting a recommendation to you or I. It is entirely systems driven with probabilities and algorithms.
It would be a funny image, right? Hey, you got like 50 people in a room, like someone's online buying a toaster, like quick.
Exactly.
Someone's running up with a slip, like a ticker tape, like I typed this out. Yeah, so the computers help. So let's. I'm curious. Let's shift to stewardship and trust, because in the last year, even in the last 2 weeks, like so there's a breach of Target. Now there's one more story about Facebook, how they've been selling our private messaging data to tech companies for years, including Amazon and Apple and others. So I think as consumers, we'll only give up some privacy if there is a benefit. But doesn't it also get a little scary? So if you want that intimacy, and you want to have that relationship with a brand, but then you don't really have a lot of control over what's happening with your information behind the scenes. So how do you develop a trusting relationship with a brand, and how do we do that with the customer, and how do we, I guess, give them reassurance that we're protecting their information?
Right, and I think there's kind of 3 angles to this. One is those aggregators of information and in broadest strokes, whose services may be free, but the cliche is, of course, that you, as the user of that, you're the product. There are the brands who are interested in selling you their iPhone or laptop or whatever it happens to be, and there are, of course, us as consumers, the individuals that in the center of this thing. And I think what behooves every brand, again, to the beginning of where we started, this notion of you have to have integrity and authenticity in everything you do. If you feel that you are acquiring data that gives you an unauthorized view or a lens, an insight into a customer that they wouldn't willingly have shared with you themselves, you should be questioning that, right? One of the challenges I think we have as consumers is that our ability to really understand what we by default make public is just not widely grasped. Most of the services that we as consumers sign up for by default expose an immense amount of information unless you go in and turn it off, whether it's Facebook or whatever. And there's just not that acumen, perhaps, or that willingness to even invest the time to go in and really get a grip on how much information by default you're actually automatically sharing. I think people get surprised when they actually see for the first time how much of their own history has been made public and shared and is therefore now in the public domain for keeps. So there's a personal responsibility to this as well, which is if I don't want people using my personal information, I should probably try and lock it down.
And are you using your product internally for yourself?
Great question. We are indeed. We actually started on a journey of this basically beginning of, it's the beginning of this year. We've used it internally extensively, and we use our product in our own workplace enablement to help our employees become more proficient in a way that many of our customers do as well. So this isn't just for external facing stuff. This is equally for internal data sources and so on. So we've been using Coveo internally for years. But really, the beginning of this year, we started applying it in anger to our own website to ensure that we were making recommendations of content. Given that most of our customers are business buyers, they're not really looking to transact online, but they are looking to find more relevant information about the problems we help them solve on our site. And so why not use our own technology to recommend assets not only that they're likely to find interesting, but that other people like them have found interesting and have proven to be of use. And that's the essence of what this does. The machine learning process under the hood learns what good outcomes are and therefore recommends things that have proven to be useful to others. And it's that cycle that one wants to ultimately be able to enable within your systems.
Good stuff. Well, Mark, I could probably talk to you about customer experience all day long. So we'll be following your success over at Coveo. And thanks for being on the program today.
Jeff, it's been a pleasure. Thanks for the time.
You bet.